"Make it fast, Chief." "I won't beg," he said, but the Apache chief saw something else in him. His clothes were dusty, and a small tear ran across his sleeve from a branch he had brushed against earlier. He had been traveling for days, moving through unfamiliar land, guided only by an old map and the determination to reach his destination. Every mile had been hard, every night colder than the last. But John did not stop. He could not stop. Not yet. In the distance, he saw the faint outline of a village tucked between the hills. Smoke curled lazily from small chimneys, and the occasional figure moved among the tents and huts. He slowed his horse, squinting to see more clearly. This was it, the place he had been searching for, the village of the Apache. The stories he had heard as a child, whispered around campfires, spoke of the chief who ruled with wisdom and fairness, yet demanded respect. John had never imagined he would come here, yet now he had no choice. As he approached, the villagers began to notice him. Children paused in their play, elders looked up from their work, and dogs barked softly from a distance. John felt a twinge of unease. He had expected curiosity, perhaps caution, but the silent, watchful eyes of the village made him feel exposed, as if every misstep would be noticed. He nudged his horse forward, letting it pick its way carefully along the worn path. At the edge of the village, the chief appeared. He was an older man, tall and steady, with eyes that seemed to look straight through a person. His face was lined with age and experience, yet his presence was calm, almost comforting. John dismounted quickly, brushing dust from his pants, and tried to compose himself. "I need to speak with your chief," John said, his voice firm despite the fatigue in his body. "It's important. Please let me meet him." The chief said nothing at first, just observed John with his steady gaze. Finally, after a moment that felt longer than it was, he nodded. John was led toward the center of the village, where a small fire burned and children sat playing near its warmth. The chief seated himself on a simple wooden bench, his posture upright, his expression unreadable. John stood before him, his jaw tight. He did not bow, he did not plead. He wanted this done quickly. The urgency in his heart had made him impatient long before he arrived here. "Make it fast, Chief. I won't beg," he said, his words clipped but firm. He expected the chief to react with surprise, perhaps even irritation. But the man only tilted his head slightly, studying him carefully. The chief's eyes were sharp, yet there was a hint of curiosity there. He did not see just a stranger who demanded his time. He saw something deeper, something that John himself barely understood. There was a fire in the young man's heart, a determination forged by hardship and loss, and the chief could sense it. He saw the struggle behind John's impatience, the pride behind his words. The chief finally spoke, his voice calm and deliberate. "You are in my village now. Words are easy, actions are harder. If you want my help, you must show me who you are, not just what you say." Yet something in the chief's voice made him pause. There was authority, yes, but also wisdom. The kind of wisdom that could only be earned through experience, through trials that tested the heart and mind. "I don't have time for tests," John muttered, his fingers clenching. "I came here for a reason. I can't waste days proving myself." Instead, he gestured toward the village. "Walk with me. Look, observe, learn before you act, then we will speak." With a reluctant nod, he followed. As they moved through the village, John noticed details he had never seen before. Children laughing and sharing small toys, women carrying baskets of food and chatting softly, elders teaching skills and stories to the younger ones. It was not a place of chaos or danger, as he had expected. It was a living community, full of people who relied on each other, who understood the value of patience and respect. The chief spoke occasionally, pointing out small things. "See the way the children share. Even in play there is balance. Watch how the elders guide them. They do not shout or force, they show." John listened, though he struggled to absorb it all. Every word seemed simple, yet carried meaning he could feel but not yet fully understand. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower and John's body ached from travel and tension. Yet he continued to follow, driven not just by obligation but by a growing curiosity. He began to notice small acts of kindness, of courage, of honesty. The villagers worked together, supported each other, and faced challenges with quiet strength. It was a lesson in patience, in seeing beyond the surface, and John realized that the chief was teaching him without even raising his voice. By evening, they returned to the fire at the village center. John sat across from the chief, exhausted but attentive. The chief looked at him with those same sharp eyes, as if weighing the man's soul. "You are not like others who have come here demanding what they want. You are hurried, yes, but I see a fire inside you that is rare. It is not impatience alone. It is need, responsibility, courage. That is why you are here." Relief because the chief did not dismiss him, did not turn him away. Unease because he realized that his journey was not over, that this village, this chief, would require more from him than he had anticipated. But for the first time in many days, he felt the faintest sense of hope. Perhaps this place, this encounter, was what he needed, not just answers but understanding. That night, as the village settled into quiet, John found himself walking to the edge of the firelight. He looked at the stars, scattered across the dark sky, and thought of the road he had traveled. Every mile, every struggle, every moment of doubt had led him here. And though he had demanded speed, he now understood that some lessons required patience. Some truths could not be rushed. The chief remained seated, watching him with that quiet, unwavering gaze. John could feel it, the silent acknowledgement that he had arrived not just at a village, but at the threshold of something greater. A lesson in strength, in humility, in the kind of courage that came not from action alone, but from understanding oneself and the world around. And in that moment, John realized that the man he had been, the impatient, restless traveler, was changing. The journey had only begun, but already he could feel the first stirrings of something new, respect, not just for the chief or the village, but for himself. For the first time in a long while, he did not just want an answer. He wanted to learn. The fire crackled softly, the night air cool against his face, and John knew that whatever came next, he would face it with eyes open, heart steady, and the lessons of this village beginning to take root within him. Morning came quietly to the village, with a soft golden light spilling over the hills and warming the small huts. Birds chirped, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees. John woke early, feeling the stiffness of travel in his muscles. He had slept under the open sky the night before, near the village fire, and for the first time in days, he felt a small measure of peace. Yet, his mind was restless. He knew that his journey was far from over. The chief had not spoken much that morning, but his presence was still commanding. John had learned by now that silence in this village was not emptiness. It was observation, reflection, and understanding. He watched the chief move with ease, greeting each villager politely, offering guidance and listening with patience. The way the chief interacted with his people left a strong impression on John. Every action seemed deliberate, yet gentle. Every word held weight, yet no one felt pressured. The chief finally turned to John and spoke. "Today you will begin learning through action," he said. "Words are useful, but deeds show character. Help the villagers, observe, participate. Then we will speak again." But he nodded, understanding that resistance here would achieve nothing. Pride could not carry him through this place. Patience would. And so, he followed the chief as the village slowly came to life. The first task was simple. John was asked to carry water from a nearby stream to the central storage barrels. It seemed easy, almost beneath him, yet he realized quickly it was harder than it appeared. The buckets were heavy, and the path to the stream was uneven, dotted with rocks and low branches. John stumbled more than once, spilling water on the ground and muttering in frustration. The villagers watched quietly, but no one mocked him. Even the children paused to see if he could manage. By the third trip, sweat ran down John's face and his arms ached. He looked at the chief, ready to complain, but the chief only nodded encouragingly. "Keep going, watch yourself. Focus," he said calmly. There was no scolding, only observation. John felt an odd mixture of annoyance and respect. It was not easy to accept guidance without complaint, but the chief's demeanor demanded neither argument nor rebellion. After he finished the water task, John was asked to help an elder in the village prepare food. The elder, a kind woman with soft eyes, showed him how to clean and cut vegetables, arrange grains for cooking, and preserve herbs for future use. John had done cooking before, but this felt different. The woman's patience was endless, her instructions clear yet gentle. John found himself slowing down, paying attention to details he would normally ignore. The chopping of vegetables became rhythmic, almost meditative. He realized he had never focused so completely on a task in his life. Throughout the day, John continued learning in small, practical ways. He helped repair fences, watched the blacksmith shape tools with skill and precision, and listened to the elders tell stories of the land, the rivers, and the mountains. Each activity seemed ordinary on its surface, but John felt the depth behind them. Every action had purpose, every lesson was layered with meaning. Slowly he began to understand what the chief meant. Strength was not shown only in confrontation or determination. It was shown in patience, observation, and respect. By afternoon, John had begun to see the villagers differently. The children were not just playing, they were learning cooperation. The women were not just preparing food, they were preserving traditions. The men were not just working, they were teaching responsibility. Each individual was a thread in the fabric of the community. And John, for all his experience in the world beyond the hills, had never been part of such a whole. During a brief rest by the stream, John allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had always thought of himself as independent, capable, and self-reliant. Yet here in this village, he realized how much he had relied on speed, force, and immediate results. He had rushed through life, missing the lessons in observation, patience, and careful thought. Watching the water ripple over the stones, he felt a quiet shift within him. Perhaps the chief was teaching him not just about the village, but about himself. The chief approached and stood silently beside him. "You are beginning to see," the chief said softly. "You notice the small things, the care, the thought behind each action. That is the first step. Many who arrive here never do." But something in the chief's calm voice made him hesitate. There was a wisdom in silence that demanded patience, and John began to see that answers might not come from demand but from observation, reflection, and learning. Later, the chief sent John to work with the hunters. They were preparing for a long journey into the hills to track game. John had some experience with tracking animals in his youth, but he had never done it with such careful attention. The hunters taught him to watch for footprints, listen for subtle sounds in the forest, and observe changes in the wind and light. Every lesson required concentration and humility. John made mistakes, of course, but the hunters guided him without impatience, allowing him to learn naturally. As the sun began to set, John returned to the village, exhausted but alive with a sense of accomplishment. The chief met him at the edge of the path. "Today, you have worked, observed, and learned. You have shown determination and a willingness to adapt." "That is important," the chief said. His eyes seemed to look directly into John's soul, reading not just his actions but his intentions, his fears, and his potential. John felt something he had not felt in a long time: respect. For the first time, he realized that respect could not be demanded, it had to be earned. And perhaps the chief had already begun seeing something in him that he had not yet recognized himself. That night, the villagers gathered around the fire, sharing stories and songs. John sat among them, listening quietly. The laughter of children, the soft hum of women preparing small meals, the elders' voices weaving tales of courage and wisdom, it all blended into a rhythm that was both soothing and enlightening. He felt a connection, however subtle, to the people around him. The chief remained seated at the center, observing not just John, but the entire village. He occasionally spoke, sharing insights into life, respect, and responsibility. John listened, taking in each word, each gesture, each lesson in patience and understanding. He realized that he had arrived here seeking a solution to a problem, but he was discovering something more important, a deeper understanding of himself and what it meant to face life with integrity. By the time John lay down to sleep, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had been long and filled with challenges, but he had begun to learn in ways he had never imagined. The chief had not rushed him, had not demanded obedience, but had guided him gently, allowing him to find his own path. It was exhausting, yet enlightening. John closed his eyes, thinking of the tasks he had completed, the lessons he had learned, and the people he had met. He realized that his journey had changed. It was no longer just about reaching a goal or resolving a problem. It was about learning, understanding, and growing. And he knew deep in his heart that the chief had seen something in him that was worth guiding, worth teaching, and perhaps worth trusting. The village settled into quiet night sounds, soft breathing, distant wolves howling, and the gentle rustle of trees. John drifted into a restful sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to show the strength and courage that the chief already recognized in him. For the first time, he understood that learning was not weakness, and patience was not surrender. Both were strength. Both were a part of the man he was becoming. The morning sun filtered softly through the trees, casting a warm glow over the village. Birds sang, and the faint sound of the stream nearby created a gentle, peaceful background. John woke early, as he had each day since arriving, feeling the lingering soreness in his muscles from the previous day's work. But this morning was different. There was a quiet anticipation in him, a sense that he was beginning to understand the rhythm of the village and perhaps, slowly, himself. The chief had been waiting near the fire when John stepped outside his small shelter. His presence was calm and steady as always, but today there was a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Today," the chief said, "you will learn about more than tasks. You will learn about history, choices, and the weight of life. Come." Children ran past them, laughing, carrying small bundles of herbs or sticks for the fire. The smell of fresh bread being baked in clay ovens filled the air. John felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. The chief introduced John to the elders. "This is John," he said, "a man who has come far and has a burden to bear. He will stay with us and we will share our knowledge with him. He must learn what it means to see beyond himself. We do not ask you to speak it all at once, but the truth always finds its way when the heart is ready." Throughout the morning, John helped the elders in small ways. He assisted in mending blankets, gathering firewood, and sorting herbs for medicine. Each task required attention and care, but more importantly, it gave him the chance to observe, to listen, and to reflect. The chief remained nearby, watching quietly, allowing John to engage naturally with the villagers while subtly guiding him through his actions. After some time, the chief called John to walk with him alone to the edge of the village. The two of them sat under the shade of a large tree, the wind moving gently through the leaves. The chief looked at John, his eyes steady and kind. "You have worked hard, John. You have shown patience and effort, but there is something more to learn. You must face what you carry inside you, the reason you have come here. You cannot run from it. Only by understanding it will you find clarity." Yet something about the chief's calm manner made him feel as though he could. He took a deep breath and slowly, carefully began to speak. "I came here because I lost someone I cared about deeply," he said, his voice shaking slightly. I made mistakes. I trusted the wrong people. I allowed anger and pride to guide me, and it cost me more than I ever thought I could bear. I have been searching for a way to make it right, to find some sense of peace, some way to honor what I lost. I thought coming here to you, to this village, I would find answers, but I do not know what to do yet." For the first time in years, John felt as though he was not being judged. He felt as though someone truly understood the weight of his heart. "You have carried this alone for too long," the chief said softly. "Pain is part of life, yes, but it must not blind you. Anger, pride, and impatience will not heal wounds. understanding, reflection, and action guided by wisdom will. You have taken the first step by being honest with yourself. That is courage. He realized that this village, these people, had begun to teach him something far more valuable than any immediate solution to his problems. They were teaching him how to live with integrity, how to face life with courage, and how to grow from pain rather than be consumed by it. The chief stood and extended a hand. "Come. There is more to show you." They walked together to a nearby ridge overlooking the rolling hills and forests beyond. The chief pointed to the distant horizon. "Every choice you make, every action you take leaves a mark. Some are small, some are large, but all shape the future. What you carry inside you can guide your steps wisely or weigh you down if you let it. It is your choice, John." When they returned to the village, John found himself involved in more tasks. He helped repair the roof of one of the huts, worked alongside the blacksmith to mend tools, and assisted the women in preparing a communal meal. Each task, no matter how small, became a lesson in observation, patience, and attention to detail. He found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before: the way the wind moved through the trees, the patterns of bird calls, the subtle expressions on people's faces. He realized that life was filled with lessons if one only took the time to observe. As evening approached, the villagers gathered again around the fire. John sat among them, listening as stories were told, tales of courage, loss, triumph, and the choices that had shaped the lives of the people in the village. He noticed that each story carried a lesson, a subtle guidance woven through the events, and he began to see parallels in his own life. His past mistakes, his losses, his regrets, they were all parts of a story he could learn from, not just dwell upon. The chief joined him by the fire, sitting quietly. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but loud enough for John to hear. "Strength is not in how fast one acts or how loudly one demands. Strength is in patience, understanding, and the courage to face oneself. You are beginning to see this, John. That is why you are here." That night, as he lay under the stars, John thought about the elder's words, the chief's guidance, and the small lessons of the day. He understood that the journey he had begun in search of answers was transforming into a journey of self-discovery. The weight he had carried for so long felt a little lighter, not because his problems were gone, but because he had begun to see them with clarity. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel hope, not the fleeting hope of quick solutions, but the steady hope of growth, understanding, and transformation. He realized that the chief had not just seen a restless man demanding answers. He had seen someone capable of learning, of listening, and of changing. And that realization gave John a strength he had not known he possessed. The night was quiet, filled with the sounds of the village settling into rest. John's heart felt a gentle calm. He had faced a part of his past, shared a burden he had carried alone for too long, and begun to understand the lessons of patience, observation, and courage. He knew that the days ahead would bring more challenges, more lessons, and more growth. But he also knew that he was not alone, and that the chief, the elders, and the village would guide him along the way. As he drifted to sleep, John made a silent promise to himself. He would face each day with honesty, each challenge with courage, and each lesson with patience. The journey was far from over, but he no longer felt the desperate urgency that had driven him here. Instead, he felt the quiet strength that comes from understanding oneself and the world around. And in that quiet moment, under the stars and the watchful eyes of the village, John knew that he was beginning to change. He was beginning to grow into the man the chief had already seen within him. The next morning, the sun rose bright and clear over the village, casting long golden rays across the hills. John awoke with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Over the past days, he had learned so much about patience, respect, and understanding. But today, he felt that the chief intended to push him further, beyond observation and simple tasks, towards something that would truly test his courage and judgment. The chief was waiting at the edge of the village, leaning on a long wooden staff. His expression was calm as always, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that caught John's attention. "Today, John," the chief said, "you will face a choice, a test not of strength but of heart and mind. The path before you will challenge you. What you do will show who you truly are." The chief was offering a chance to prove that the lessons he had learned so far, the patience, the observation, the understanding, could guide him in the face of a real challenge. They walked together to a clearing on the edge of the forest. There waiting were two men who had come from a nearby settlement. They carried themselves with authority, yet there was tension in their stance. John recognized immediately what this was, a confrontation he had been fearing, the very challenge that had driven him to this village. One of the men stepped forward. "We know why you've come," he said, his voice steady but firm. "We cannot allow you to proceed unless certain conditions are met. You must decide quickly, or leave without accomplishing anything." He remembered the lessons of the elders, the patience learned in fetching water, preparing food, and observing the village. He took a deep breath, grounding himself. The chief stepped forward slightly and spoke in a clear, measured voice. "John does not seek confrontation. He seeks understanding. There is more than one way to resolve this. Observe, reflect, and act with care. I am here to resolve what must be resolved, but I will not act recklessly. Let us talk. Let us understand each other before decisions are made." John listened carefully as they explained their position, their concerns, and their demands. He could feel the old impatience rising, the desire to cut through the situation quickly. But he resisted. He thought of the chief's words, the lessons of the village, and he realized that rushing now would only create more problems. John responded with clarity and honesty, explaining his intentions, the reason for his journey, and the loss that had brought him here. He did not plead, he did not threat, he simply spoke the truth, showing respect for the men's perspective. As he spoke, he noticed a shift in their demeanor. Their hostility softened, replaced by cautious understanding. The chief remained a silent presence nearby, observing John's actions closely. He saw the patience, the courage, and the wisdom in John's approach. He saw the growth from a man who had once demanded answers without care to a man who could face challenges with clarity and integrity. Hours passed as the conversation continued. John stayed calm, focused, and attentive. He asked questions, considered their responses, and proposed solutions that were fair and reasonable. The two men began to recognize that John was not reckless or impulsive, but deliberate and thoughtful. They realized that he sought resolution, not conflict. Finally, after long discussion, an agreement was reached. The tension that had hung over the clearing for hours dissipated. The men nodded, acknowledging John's honesty, patience, and intelligence. They stepped back, allowing him to proceed. John felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced a challenge that could have ended in conflict, yet he had handled it with wisdom and calmness. The chief approached, his expression proud yet understated. "You have done well," he said. "You faced what you feared not with force but with understanding. That is courage. That is strength. Many who come here would have chosen anger, pride, or haste. You chose patience, honesty, and reflection. That is why you are ready for what comes next." He had learned that strength was not in speed or aggression, but in patience, understanding, and courage to face oneself and others fairly. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, John returned to the village with the chief. The villagers greeted him warmly, sensing the change in him. He had grown from a restless, impatient stranger into someone who could navigate challenges with thoughtfulness and respect. The elders nodded approvingly, recognizing the growth that had taken place. That evening, John sat with the chief by the fire. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows across their faces. John spoke quietly. "I understand now. I thought this journey was only about reaching a goal, but it has been about learning. About facing myself, my fears, and my mistakes. About understanding how to act with wisdom. Every decision leaves a mark. Remember that." He was changing, becoming someone capable of facing life's trials with integrity. Later that night, John walked to the edge of the village alone. He gazed at the stars, reflecting on the events of the day. He thought of the confrontation, the calm he had maintained, and the lessons he had applied. He felt a sense of pride, tempered with humility. He understood that true strength was not in winning arguments or forcing outcomes, but in navigating life with care, courage, and respect for others. The village was quiet, yet alive with the soft sounds of life, dogs barking in the distance, children whispering before sleep, and the gentle rustle of trees in the night breeze. John felt a deep connection to the people around him, a bond that had grown through shared work, observation, and understanding. He realized that this village, this chief, and these experiences had given him something far more valuable than answers. They had given him wisdom. As he lay down to sleep, John reflected on the chief's words. Every action leaves a mark, every choice matters. He knew that the path ahead would test him further, but he felt ready. Not because he had all the answers, but because he had learned to face challenges with patience, thoughtfulness, and courage. And in that quiet night, under the stars and the watchful eyes of the village, John understood that the journey was transforming him. The impatient, restless man who had demanded speed and answers was changing into someone capable of facing life's challenges with strength, integrity, and calm. For the first time, John felt that he was truly prepared, not just for the challenges of the world beyond the village, but for the challenges within himself. And he knew that the lessons he had learned here, guided by the chief, would stay with him forever. The morning light was soft and warm, filtering through the trees and bathing the village in gold. John woke with a feeling of calm he had never known before. Over the past days, he had learned more than he had expected, lessons about patience, courage, humility, and understanding. Today he knew he would face the final part of his journey, the moment he had been preparing for in small ways all along. The chief was waiting near the fire, calm as always. He did not speak immediately, only watched John with his steady, knowing gaze. "Today, John," he said finally, "you will act. Everything you have learned, observed, and experienced will be tested. Remember, strength is not in haste or force. It is in clarity, courage, and integrity. Carry this with you as you face what comes next." He was no longer the same man who had arrived, demanding quick answers. He had grown, shaped by the lessons of the village, the guidance of the chief, and the patience he had cultivated within himself. As he walked to the edge of the village, he saw the same two men from before, waiting as they had that first tense day. But today was different. John felt no fear, no impatience, only clarity. He approached them calmly, with his head held high, and greeted them respectfully. "I have come to resolve what we spoke of before," he said. "I wish for understanding, not conflict. Let us find a way that honors both sides." They listened carefully as John explained his intentions, the reason for his journey, and the path he wished to take. He spoke not just with words but with the honesty of his heart, showing the courage to face the truth without hiding behind pride or anger. The discussion was long, but John remained patient. He listened carefully to the men's concerns, considered their perspective, and responded with clarity and fairness. He applied the lessons he had learned in the village: observation, reflection, and careful action. With every word, he demonstrated not only knowledge but integrity, proving that he had changed. The chief watched from the edge of the clearing, silent but approving. He could see the growth in John, the patience, the wisdom, and the courage to face a challenge with honesty rather than force. The villagers, who had gathered quietly to watch, sensed the change as well. They recognized that the young man who had arrived with impatience and urgency had transformed into someone capable of handling life's most difficult moments with dignity. Finally, after hours of careful discussion, a resolution was reached. The tension that had once threatened to erupt into conflict dissipated. The two men nodded, acknowledging John's honesty, fairness, and courage. John felt a quiet satisfaction, not from winning or dominating, but from having acted with integrity. He realized that the real victory was not in forcing an outcome, but in navigating life's challenges wisely and respectfully. The chief stepped forward, placing a hand gently on John's shoulder. "You have done well," he said. "You have faced what you feared, and you have done so with clarity, courage, and integrity. Many who come here would have acted with haste or force. You chose wisdom, and that is strength. Remember this, for it will guide you long after you leave this place." He understood now that the journey was never just about reaching a goal or solving a problem. It was about learning to face life with honesty, courage, and respect for others. As the sun began to set, John returned to the village, where the elders and villagers greeted him warmly. They saw the change in him, the calm confidence, the thoughtful presence, and the respect he showed to everyone around him. Children approached him, curious and playful, and he smiled, realizing that he could now connect with them in a way he had never imagined. The elders nodded approvingly, recognizing the growth that had taken place over the past days. That evening, the villagers gathered around the fire, sharing stories, songs, and laughter. John sat quietly among them, reflecting on all that had happened. He thought of the challenges he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the guidance he had received. He realized that the journey had changed him in ways he could never have predicted. He had discovered patience, courage, and the ability to act with integrity. He had learned that strength came not from force or haste, but from wisdom, understanding, and the willingness to face oneself honestly. The chief joined him by the fire, and they sat in silence for a few moments, watching the flames dance. Finally, John spoke softly. "I came here seeking answers. I thought I needed speed and action, but I understand now. The answers were never about quick results. They were about learning, understanding, and growing. I have found more than solutions. I have found wisdom. You have learned to act with courage, patience, and integrity. Carry this with you, and you will find strength in any situation." He understood that life would continue to test him, but he now had the tools, the wisdom, and the inner strength to meet those tests with clarity and integrity. As night fell over the village, John walked to the edge of the clearing and looked at the stars. The world seemed vast and full of possibilities. He thought of the journey he had taken, the long miles through difficult terrain, the moments of doubt and frustration, and the lessons learned from the villagers and the chief. He realized that every step had led him to this moment, shaping him into someone capable of facing life's challenges with courage and wisdom. Before retiring for the night, John visited the chief one last time. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for guiding me, for teaching me, for seeing something in me that I did not see in myself." He had come to the village seeking answers, but he was leaving with something far greater: the knowledge that true strength comes from patience, courage, integrity, and the wisdom to act thoughtfully. He understood now that the journey of life was not about rushing to conclusions or demanding immediate results, but about learning, growing, and facing challenges with honesty and heart. As he prepared to leave the village the next morning, the villagers gathered to bid him farewell. Children waved, elders smiled, and the chief watched with quiet pride. John felt a sense of belonging he had never expected. Though he was returning to the wider world, he carried with him the lessons of the village, the guidance of the chief, and the strength he had discovered within himself. Mounting his horse, John took one last look at the village. The sun rose over the hills, casting a warm glow across the landscape. He felt a quiet confidence, a steady calm, and the knowledge that he was ready to face whatever life would bring. The journey was far from over, but he no longer feared it. He had learned to face challenges with patience, courage, and wisdom, and that was a strength no obstacle could take from him. As John rode into the distance, the village faded behind him, but the lessons and guidance would remain forever. The chief had seen something in him, nurtured it, and helped him grow. John now understood not only the importance of courage and determination, but also the power of patience, reflection, and integrity. And with that understanding, he felt ready for anything the future might hold.